Most folks will tell you a perennial that lives 20 years is a miracle. I'm Walt Holloway, and the lilac bush behind my Vermont farmhouse was planted by my grandmother Eliza in 1962 when I was 3 years old, crawling around her ankles in the dirt. That lilac is 64 years old. It bloomed yesterday, and it's not the oldest plant in my garden. Heritage sprouts. What I'm about to tell you contradicts every glossy garden catalog you've ever read. The industry wants you replacing perennials every 5 to 7 years. Buying, digging, buying again. My grandmother bought 9 plants in 1962, the year Kennedy was president, and every single one is still alive in 2026. Some of them have been divided so many times I've gifted clumps to 3 neighbors, 2 churches, and the elementary school down the road. These aren't fragile museum pieces. They survived ice storms that took down 100-year-old maples. They survived the winter of 1989, 40 below for 9 days straight. They survived me as a teenager mowing too close, my dog Buster digging for chipmunks, and 22 years of teaching horticulture at UVM where I sometimes forgot to mulch them properly. By the end of this video, you'll know which 9 perennials a Vermont farm wife planted 64 years ago that any of you could plant this weekend and reasonably expect your grandchildren to enjoy. The last one on the list, plant number 9, is the one her hands actually went into the soil to plant. It's the one that taught me everything I know about what a heritage plant actually means. Before we begin, I need to know who's watching. The plants my grandmother chose were perfect for Zone 4B, Vermont. Some of you are in Zone 9, Florida, others in Zone 6, Pennsylvania. Drop your USDA zone in the comments right now, along with the name of one plant that's been growing in your family's garden longer than you can remember. I read every comment over morning coffee. If you've never subscribed, do it now. The Heritage Sprouts list grows every week. My grandfather planted these rows. My grandchildren will harvest them. That's not a slogan I made up for this video. That's the literal arithmetic of what I'm about to show you. In 1962, my grandmother Eliza Holloway was 61 years old, the same age I was when my Rosie passed. She had buried her first husband, raised 4 children through the Depression, and was finally setting in the kind of garden she'd dreamed about for 30 years. She didn't have Google. She didn't have a county extension agent on speed dial. She had the Burpee catalog, a phone party line shared with 5 neighbors, and the accumulated knowledge of every farm wife within walking distance. What she chose to plant tells you more about real, durable perennials than any modern trial garden ever could. Because every one of these plants had to do 3 things: survive a Vermont winter, multiply enough to share with the church plant sale, and look halfway decent the year a husband or a son didn't get around to weeding. These are the 9 perennials that passed her test. Not Mount Cuba's test, not the National Garden Bureau's test, Eliza Holloway's test. And 64 years later, they're all still alive. Let's start with the one that's bloomed in front of my kitchen window every single May since I was born. Plant number 1 is the peony, specifically Paeonia lactiflora festiva maxima, a French heirloom variety introduced in 1851 by a breeder named Auguste Mielez near Lille. White petals with a single crimson flag in the center, like the plant decided to wear lipstick. My grandmother had 3 of them in the front border. She paid $1.50 each from a Miller Nursery's catalog. Today, those same plants are in the same spots. I have not moved them. I have not divided them. They simply got bigger and bigger until they're now 4 feet across and produce roughly 200 blossoms a year between them. Here's what the labels won't tell you. A peony, properly planted, will outlive the person who planted it. The American Peony Society documents peonies that have bloomed continuously for over 100 years. The Cornell University Trial Garden has specimens dating to the 1920s. My grandmother's 3 are nothing special. They're average. Average peony, planted right, equals 5 generations of June blooms. What's planting them right? 2 inches. That's the depth of the eye, the pink bud, below the soil surface. 2 inches deep, no more. Plant them 3 inches deep and they will sulk for 40 years, producing leaves but never flowers, and you will blame yourself when really you just buried them too greedy. The plant doesn't care what the catalog said about depth. The plant cares about 2 inches, full sun, 8 hours minimum. They tolerate afternoon shade in the south, but in Vermont they want every photon they can get. Soil should drain like a sieve. Peonies despise wet feet. My grandmother planted hers on a slight slope where the snowmelt ran off and the spring rain didn't pool. 3 of her sisters planted peonies in flat, low ground and lost them in the first wet spring. The plant was the same. The location killed it. USDA Zone 3 through 8. They actually need the winter chill. Below Zone 8, the plants get fewer flowers, smaller blooms, and shorter lifespans because they never get the cold dormancy they evolved for. A peony in Florida is a sad plant pretending. A peony in Vermont is a peony being a peony. Pest and disease are minimal. Botrytis blight in wet springs. Some ant traffic because the buds exude nectar before they open, which is harmless. Don't spray the ants. They're not damaging anything. My grandmother used to say the ants were paying rent. Plant number 2 is the bearded iris, specifically Iris germanica honorabile, introduced in 1840 by a Frenchman named Lamont. Yellow standards on top, mahogany falls below. Looks like a Victorian gentleman's pocket square. My grandmother had a row of 11 of them along the south side of the chicken coop. Heritage sprouts. I'm going to break frame for 1 second here, because there's something the garden center will never admit. The bearded iris you buy today at the big box store is genetically not the same plant as the one my grandmother bought in 1962. The modern cultivars have been bred for bigger blooms, ruffled petals, and rebloomers. What they lost in the process is the iron constitution of the heirlooms. The new ones rot, they get iris borer worse, and they peter out in 15 years. Honorabile, planted in 1962, has been digging through the same Vermont clay for 64 years and still throws 30 flowers each May. Rhizomes go on top of the soil, not in the soil, on top of it. Half of the rhizomes should be exposed to air and sun. This is the single most common mistake I corrected during 22 years at UVM Extension. People plant the rhizome like a bulb, buried, and the iris promptly rots. The rhizome is a sun-loving root that thinks it's a stem. Respect what the plant is. Spacing matters. 18 inches apart minimum. They will multiply outward in a circle and meet up within 4 years. My grandmother's 11 plants are now 38 clumps. I've dug and divided them every 5 years and given them to the church plant sale, my daughter Margaret in Albany, to the elementary school's pollinator project, and to about 15 UVM graduate students who needed a starter perennial. Full sun, 6 hours minimum, sandy or clay loam soil. Bearded iris does not want fertilizer. Feed it nothing more than a handful of bone meal in early spring. Nitrogen rots the rhizome. The catalog companies sell iris fertilizer that's mostly nitrogen, and it kills iris within 3 years. Don't buy it. Uzda zone 3 through 9. In zone 4B, they bloom mid to late May, lasting about 3 weeks. Cut spent flower stalks down to the base after bloom. Leave the fans of leaves to feed the rhizome through the summer. Don't cut them back until they're brown in fall. The plant needs those leaves to bank energy for next year's flowers. Pest watch is iris borer, a small caterpillar that tunnels into the rhizome. If you see soft, mushy rhizome, dig it up, cut out the damage, dust with sulfur, replant. My grandmother did this every August. She called it iris dentistry. Plant number 3 is the common daylily, Hemerocallis fulva, the orange one your grandmother probably called the ditch lily. The catalog people sneer at this plant. They call it weedy, they call it invasive, they call it old-fashioned. I have an opinion about that, and the opinion is they're selling you new hybrids at $25 a clump because they can't make any money off a plant that gives itself away for free. My grandmother planted 3 fans of Hemerocallis fulva along the woodshed in 1962. She got them from her sister May, who got them from their mother, who got them from a Norwegian neighbor in 1928. They have spread. Of course they have spread. They are now a 30-foot-long bed that I mow around in summer and that lights up bright orange every July. I have never watered them. I have never fertilized them. I have never divided them. They are functionally indestructible. Zone 3 through 9. Sun or shade, though more flowers in sun. Drought tolerant once established, tolerates clay, sand, and the kind of compacted gravel you find next to a Vermont logging road. The plant exists, the plant blooms, the plant asks nothing of you. Here's where I'll be honest. Hemerocallis fulva is non-native to North America. It came from Asia by way of European trade to American gardens in the 1700s. Some native plant societies will tell you to rip it out. I won't tell you that. What I will tell you is don't plant it next to a forest edge or a wetland where it can naturalize into wild spaces. Keep it in your defined garden bed where you can mow around it and it stops being a problem. The flowers are edible. The buds, before they open, sautéed in butter, taste somewhere between asparagus and green bean. I learned this from a Korean colleague at UVM who couldn't believe Americans grew them as ornament and didn't eat them. Pick the buds the morning they would have opened. Cook them within 4 hours. Don't dry them and store them. That's how people get stomach upset. Raw and old daylily buds will make you queasy. Now the modern hybrids. The Stella d'Oro, the Happy Returns, the Everbloomers, they are pretty. They are also nowhere near as durable. Stella d'Oro will give you 20 good years if you're lucky. Hemerocallis fulva will give you, based on my own grandmother's planting, 64 years and counting. Pick your hill to die on. I'd rather have the ugly old workhorse that's still there when I'm not. Plant number 4 is the only edible on this list, rhubarb. Rheum rhubarbarum victoria, the British heirloom variety introduced in 1837 and named for the new queen. My grandmother planted 3 crowns of it behind the smokehouse in 1962. Those 3 crowns are now 12 crowns, 64 years, same patch. I once paid $40 for a rare French lavender that turned out to be the same one growing wild behind my barn. Don't be Walt. That same year, my first year managing the rhubarb patch after my grandmother went to the nursing home, I harvested it 12 times in one season because the plant kept regrowing, and I thought I was being thrifty. I nearly killed all 3 crowns. The plant needs 4 to 6 harvests a year, then leave it alone. The leaves run photosynthesis to refuel the crown for next year. I learned that the hard way, and the plants forgave me, but I shouldn't have needed to learn it. Rhubarb is a heavy feeder. Compost in fall, compost in spring. Aged manure if you have it, which I do because the neighbor down the road keeps cattle. No chemical fertilizer. The plant doesn't respond to it the same way and tends to bolt. By bolt I mean send up a flower stalk in midsummer, which you should cut off the moment you see it, because flowering pulls energy away from the edible stalks for next year. Zone 3 through 8. Needs winter chill to break dormancy. Will not grow properly south of Zone 8. Florida gardeners, sorry, this isn't your plant. Vermont gardeners, this plant was made for us. Full sun, 6 to 8 hours, will tolerate light afternoon shade. Soil should be rich, deep, and well drained. Plant the crowns with the buds about 2 inches below the soil surface, 3 to 4 feet apart because they get big. A mature crown in Vermont can spread to 4 feet across. The leaves are toxic, oxalic acid. The stalks are safe and what we eat. Don't compost the leaves into a vegetable garden. The oxalic acid can affect soil chemistry. I throw them on the gravel road where nothing grows anyway. First harvest is the 3rd spring after planting. Year 1 and 2, you let the plant establish, take no stock. Year 3, take 1/3 of the stalks for 4 to 6 weeks. Year 4 onward, take half the stalks for 10 weeks. My grandmother made rhubarb pie every June, rhubarb strawberry jam every July, and stewed rhubarb for breakfast all winter from the freezer. One patch fed 3 generations of Holloways. It can feed yours. Heritage sprouts, take a breath, we're halfway through. 4 plants down, 5 to go, and the best is still coming. Before we go on, a question. Of the 4 perennials I've covered so far, which one are you most likely to plant this fall? Peony, iris, daylily, or rhubarb? Drop the answer in the comments. If you say peony, tell me what color. If you say iris, tell me the cultivar. If you don't know yet, write, I don't know yet, and I'll point you in the right direction. The comments section is where the real garden lives. And if this video is teaching you something, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm to show this to people who garden the long way. Plant number 5 is Lily of the Valley, Convallaria majalis. Small white bell-shaped flowers on a 6-inch stalk, deep green leaves like the lid of a tureen. My grandmother planted a single 12-inch patch of it under the north-facing maple in 1962. That single patch is now a 100-square-foot carpet that I have to edge with a sharpened spade every spring, or it will swallow the lawn. The plant doesn't read the label. The catalog will tell you Convallaria majalis prefers moist, well-drained soil and part shade. Mine grows in dry, compacted clay under a maple root mat where nothing else has ever survived. It is spectacular every May. The label is wrong because the plant has a 100-year track record of growing where it wants to grow regardless of what humans think. Hardiness zone 2 through 7 technically. Mine in zone 4B thrives. South of zone 7 it weakens, prefers cooler nights. Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Upper Michigan, and similar climates are the sweet spot. Plant the pips, the small white root buds, an inch deep, 2 inches apart in fall or early spring. They will spread by rhizome. I cannot emphasize this enough. Plant them where you want them to be in 20 years, because you will not be relocating them. They form a solid mat of rhizome you would need a backhoe to move. Now, fair warning, every part of this plant is toxic to humans and pets. The berries that form after flowering are particularly attractive to children because they look like red beads. Cardiac glycosides, the same chemical class as digitalis. Do not plant where dogs run, where toddlers crawl, where livestock graze. My grandmother planted it where the chickens couldn't reach, and the dog wasn't allowed. I followed her lead for 64 years and never lost an animal or a child. Flowers are intensely fragrant for 2 weeks in May. The Brits make perfume from them. I cut a few stalks and put them in a juice glass on the kitchen windowsill every spring. The fragrance fills the kitchen by sundown. It is the smell of every May of my life. Pollinator value is moderate. The flowers attract some bumblebees and small native bees. Hummingbirds occasionally visit. Deer leave it alone because of the toxicity. Rabbits leave it alone. Voles leave it alone. The only thing that bothers it is dry shade with no organic matter, which it survives but doesn't thrive in. Once established, you cannot kill this plant. Drought, flood, ice, deer, neglect. It outlasts everything. My grandmother's patch will outlast me. Plant number 6 is the old-fashioned bleeding heart. Lamprocapnos spectabilis, formerly Dicentra spectabilis until the taxonomists changed the name in 2010 and made every old garden book wrong. Pink heart-shaped flowers on arching stems, dangling like jewelry from a clothesline. My grandmother planted 2 of them flanking the kitchen door in 1962. Both are still there. Opinion. The modern hybrids of bleeding heart The King of Hearts, the Burning Hearts, the Valentine are bred for compact size and reblooming. They are pretty plants. They are not the same plants as old-fashioned spectabilis. The modern ones go dormant by August every summer because they're bred from Western. Decentras adapted to brief springs. The old spectabilis stays in leaf through July, sometimes into August in Vermont if I keep it watered. That extra month of foliage matters in a perennial garden. The catalog people sell the new ones because they're patented and they make royalty. They don't sell the old ones because anyone can divide one. That's not gardening, that's gambling with a price tag. Plant in part shade. Morning sun, afternoon shade is ideal. Dappled all-day shade works. Deep shade gives you leaves but few flowers. Rich, moist, well-drained soil with plenty of leaf mold. My grandmother planted hers in the band of soil where the eaves drip, naturally moist from spring snowmelt. Zone 3 through 9, cold hardy and reliable. Tolerates the cold winters and even tolerates southern heat if it has enough shade and water. Plant the crowns about an inch below the soil with the dormant pink buds facing up. Crowns are sold bare root in spring or in pots through nurseries. Spring planting is easier in cold climates. Fall planting works in zone 6 and warmer. The plant emerges in late April here in Vermont. Flowers in May for about 3 weeks. Holds attractive blue-green foliage through June and July. By August, it begins to yellow and go dormant. Cut back to the ground when fully yellow. Do not cut earlier. The leaves are still feeding the crown. Deer leave it alone. Rabbits leave it alone. The sap contains isoquinoline alkaloids that taste bitter to most mammals. Slugs occasionally chew the leaves in wet years. Otherwise, it's pest-free for decades. Division is rarely needed. The clumps slowly enlarge but don't crowd themselves out the way some perennials do. Mine are about 30 inches across after 64 years. I divided one in 1998 to share with my son's wedding garden in New York. Both halves are still alive and healthy. This is the plant that taught me a perennial doesn't have to spread to last. It just has to be exactly where it wants to be. Plant number 7 is Harrison's Yellow, Rosa harrisoni, a yellow shrub rose introduced in New York in the 1820s by a lawyer named George Folliot Harrison and propagated commercially by 1830. This is the rose that pioneers brought west on the Oregon Trail. There are wild stands of it growing today around abandoned homesteads in Wyoming and Idaho, 150 years after the homesteader walked away. Heritage sprouts. This is genuinely the rose that built America's gardens, and almost no garden center sells it anymore. My grandmother had one bush, just one, planted on the south-facing wall of the smokehouse in 1962. It is now 7 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and produces 300 bright yellow double flowers for 2 weeks in early June. It has never been pruned beyond removing dead canes. It has never been sprayed. It has never been fertilized. It has been there 64 years. The reason the garden centers don't sell it is the same reason daylilies are out of fashion. You can't make money on a rose that propagates by suckers and gives itself away. One mother bush of Harrison's Yellow will produce 3 to 5 new plants a year from underground runners. I have dug starts and given them to 17 Vermont families, plus the Holloway Cemetery up the hill, which has a stand of Harrison's Yellow at every grave dating to 1894. Zone 3 through 9. Extremely cold hardy. Survived the 1989 winter that killed cultivated hybrid tea roses across all of New England. Survives drought. Survives black spot, though it does get some, which doesn't bother the plant much. Survives Japanese beetle, which it tolerates better than modern roses. Plant in full sun 6 to 8 hours minimum. Tolerates poor soil. Tolerates dry conditions once established. Wants air circulation, so don't plant against a thick hedge. The smokehouse wall gave my grandmother's bush morning sun, southern exposure, and a clear line of breeze from the south. Prune lightly after flowering, only to remove dead wood and shape if needed. Harrison's Yellow blooms on old wood, meaning the canes that grew last summer carry next spring's flowers. Heavy pruning in winter or early spring removes the flower buds. Light shaping in June, right after bloom, is all this rose needs. Suckers can be dug in fall, transplanted to a new spot, watered for 1 season, and forgotten thereafter. This is how every garden that has Harrison's Yellow got it. Someone gave them a sucker. The plant is not patented. The plant is not trademarked. The plant is a gift that gives gifts. Plant number 8 is the hosta, specifically Hosta sieboldii elegans, the big blue leaf variety introduced to American gardens by 1856. My grandmother planted 7 crowns of it along the north foundation of the farmhouse in 1962. Those 7 are now 31 clumps that span the entire north and east sides of the house. I divided them every 7 years. Each division gave me 4 to 6 new plants. Opinion. The deer in Vermont have learned to eat hosta in the last 15 years. 20 years ago, a deer wouldn't touch a hosta. Now they treat it like a salad bar. This is not the hosta's fault. This is the fault of suburban Vermont planting hostas in lawns where deer travel and habituating the deer to eat them. My grandmother's hostas are 8 feet from the back door. surrounded by daffodils and lily of the valley, which are toxic, with the dog yard on the other side. The deer don't bother them. Location matters more than the plant. Siboldiana elegans is the cold hardiest of the large hostas, zone 3 through 9, mature size of 3 feet tall, 4 feet wide. Blue-green leaves with heavy, almost crinkled texture. Pale lavender flowers on stalks in July, which are nice but not the main event. The leaves are the main event. Plant in part shade to full shade. Morning sun is fine. Afternoon sun in Vermont scorches the leaves. Rich, moist, well-drained soil with leaf mold. My grandmother amended the foundation soil with composted leaves every fall, a practice I continue. The plant is a heavy feeder for a perennial. Crowns should be planted with the growing tips at soil level. Spacing depends on whether you want them to grow together or stay distinct. 18 inches gives you distinct clumps. 12 inches gives you a solid ground cover by year 4. Slugs the main pest. Diatomaceous earth in a ring around each plant in spring. Iron phosphate slug bait if you have a wet year. My grandmother used crushed eggshells, which works on snails better than slugs. Voles will eat hosta roots in winter. Plant with a 1/4-inch hardware cloth, wrap around the root ball if you have heavy vole pressure. I had to learn this in 1987 when voles ate the heart out of 3 of my best plants under heavy snow cover. Division every 5 to 7 years keeps the clump vigorous and gives you new plants. Spring is the best time, just as the noses are emerging. Dig the whole clump, slice with a sharp spade into 4 pieces, replant, water for the first season. Forget thereafter. A well-sited Hosta Siboldiana will live 40 years easy. My grandmother's 764 years and counting. Plant number 9. The one I've been promising you. The one whose roots my grandmother Eliza Holloway's hands actually put into Vermont soil 64 years ago, and the one that has taught me everything I think I know about what a heritage plant actually is. Syringa vulgaris Madame Lemoine. White double-flowered lilac, introduced by the French breeder Victor Lemoine in 1890, and named for his wife who hand-pollinated thousands of crosses for him because he had bad eyesight. By 1962, when my grandmother bought a single-rooted sucker from a neighbor for 50 cents, Madame Lemoine had been the gold standard of white lilacs for 72 years. Today, in 2026, it has been the gold standard for 136 years. Some folks plant. Others put plants in the ground. Different sports entirely. My grandmother put this plant in the ground. She planted it on the southwest corner of the farmhouse, 10 feet from the kitchen window where she'd see it every morning over coffee. It is now 12 feet tall, 15 feet wide, and produces somewhere between 400 and 600 panicles of double white, intensely fragrant flowers for 3 weeks every late May. When it blooms, the entire west side of the farm smells like a perfume shop. My Rosie used to cut armfuls of it and fill the house. Every single vase in the kitchen, every mason jar in the pantry, the chamber pot we used as a kitchen vase, all of it lilac for 3 weeks. I'm going to tell you something that the catalog people don't tell you. Madame Lemoine, planted on a well-sited spot, will outlive 3 generations of the family that planted it. The Smithsonian Gardens documents lilacs at George Washington's Mount Vernon that may date to the 1780s. The Highland Park Lilac Collection in Rochester, New York has Syringa vulgaris specimens dating to 1892. My grandmother's bush is 64 years old. It is barely middle age for the variety, zone 3 through 7. This is critical. Madame Lemoine is a northern plant. It requires substantial winter chill to set flower buds. South of zone 7, it survives but barely flowers, and the flowers it does produce are smaller and less fragrant. If you live in Tennessee, Texas, Florida, Southern California, this is not your lilac. Look at Syringa vulgaris cultivars bred for warm climates like the Descanso hybrids developed in California in the 1950s. Plant in full sun, 8 hours minimum. Lilacs in shade produce leaves and no flowers. This is the single most common mistake I corrected in 22 years at UVM Extension. People plant lilacs in part shade thinking the catalog said part shade is fine. The catalog lied. The catalog needed to sell lilacs to people who don't have full sun. The plant wants sun. Soil should be slightly alkaline. Most Vermont soil is acidic from pine and maple leaf litter. Add a cup of dolomitic lime to the planting hole, mix it in, and add another cup of lime each spring under the drip line for the first 5 years. Established lilacs will pull what they need from the soil if you're patient. Planting is best in fall in zones 5 and warmer, spring in zones 3 and 4. Dig a hole twice the width of the root ball and the same depth. Set the plant with the crown at the same level as the surrounding soil, not buried. Water well the first season. After the first season, lilac is drought tolerant and asks nothing of you. Pruning. This is where everyone goes wrong. Lilacs bloom on old wood. The flower buds for next year form on the canes that grew this year in late summer. Pruning in winter or early spring removes next year's flowers. The correct time to prune is immediately after the flowers fade in June. Cut back the spent flower clusters. Remove any dead or crossing branches. Once every 5 years, remove one or two of the oldest, thickest canes at the base to encourage new growth from the roots. That's it. Never prune in late summer, fall, winter, or early spring. Pests are few. Black borer occasionally tunnels into mature canes. If you see frass at the base of a cane and the cane wilts in summer, cut it out and burn it. Powdery mildew on the leaves in late summer is cosmetic. The plant doesn't care. The flowers are edible. Lilac syrup, lilac jelly, lilac shortbread, lilac vinegar. My grandmother made all of these. My mother made them. Rosie made them. I have not made them in 5 years because Rosie was the cook in this house, and I'm still learning how to do without her. The recipes are in the family book in the kitchen. Suckers will appear from the base after about year 10. These can be dug and transplanted. This is how heritage lilacs spread from farm to farm in Vermont for 200 years. My grandmother's bush has thrown maybe 40 suckers since 1962. I've given starts to my 3 children, my 4 grandchildren, the elementary school, the church, 3 neighbors, 2 former UVM colleagues, and a Quebec gardener who drove down to my farm in 2019 to ask for a sucker because his grandmother had grown Madame Lemoine in Trois-Rivières and his bush had died. The lilac is the plant my grandmother planted with her own hands. It is the only one of the 9 I can point to and say, those roots went into this soil under the palms of Eliza Holloway in May of 1962. I was 3 years old. I watched her do it. I don't remember it, but the plant remembers it. And every May for 3 weeks, the entire farm remembers her too. 9 perennials, 64 years. One Vermont farm wife in 1962 who didn't have Google or extension agents or YouTube tutorials, just a burpee catalog, a party line, and the accumulated wisdom of every farm wife within walking distance. Heritage sprouts. Here's what I want you to do. Pick one. Just one of these 9. Plant it this fall or next spring. Put a tag on it with the date and your name on it. In 64 years, when your great-grandchild walks past that plant, they will know who planted it and when. That is what a heritage plant means. Not the variety. The plant in the ground with a person's hands and a person's date attached to it. I told you at the beginning that this video would teach you what heritage actually means. I lied a little. Heritage doesn't mean old. Heritage means continuous. It means a chain of people who cared enough to dig, water, divide, share, and remember. My grandmother is the 2nd link in our family's chain. I am the 3rd. My daughter Margaret is the 4th. Her son Henry, who's 11, is the 5th, and he's already asking which lilac suckers will be his. If you got value from this video, please verify what I've said. I'm one old man in Vermont. I make mistakes. 3 sources I trust for heritage perennial information are Mount Cubicenter at mcubicenter.org, Seed Savers Exchange at seedsavers.org, and the University of Vermont Extension at uvm.edu/extension, where I taught for 22 years. Look them up. Cross-check me. Trust the plant more than the man. Subscribe to the Heritage Sprouts. We're planting the long way.